This episode of Shaman King covers from manga chapters 191 to 197, which is a lot of chapters, but considering some of these chapters were fight chapters, I think it's fine jamming in that many chapters into one episode. When those chapters are mainly fight chapters, it works, but if the chapters have a lot of exposition and dialogue that we need to know about, rushing through those and cramming it into one episode can potentially harm the episode. But for me, this episode was an excellent episode. There was high drama between Yoh Hao and Redseb at the beginning of the episode. Yoh was at his absolute best in the middle portion of the episode, and finally Lyserg and the rest of Yoh's friends making that last minute save against Hao and his minions. Oh, and the small revelation that Seyram's dad was possessing her all along, which is the reason why she is the way she is. How messed up is that? The reason why the dad took over her body is for him to want revenge. And that's the point of this episode and one of the major lessons that Shaman King teaches us. Revenge is never the answer, but this is the greatness of Shaman King. It's like the episode itself was having a debate on whether or not revenge is the right thing to do, especially if you have been hurt to the core like the way Lyserg and the two kids have been. Yoh explains that revenge is not the answer, and I'll go more in depth with his character in a bit, but he was basically saying how revenge is bad. But at the end of the episode, Lyserg straight up admits he let Yoh Hao get shot, even though he could have saved Yoh Hao. He was sympathizing with Redseb and Seyram because Yoh Hao was the one who killed their dad. With Lyserg himself, his own parents were murdered by Hao, so he completely understands where those two were coming from. But how often do you see that, if ever, one of the main heroes let his friends die because he did a criminal act in the past, and that person that killed him wanted revenge? You don't see that often, which makes Shaman King so grey and not clear black and white. But at the end, when the rest of the crew turned up, it was epic, I can't lie. This is what you want. Two groups of shaman having a fight to the finish. The shaman fights, in my opinion, are more exciting when they are not competing in the shaman tournament. When they are fighting outside, like how the Icemen challenged Team Ren outside of the bar, or the many clashes between Yoh and friends versus Hao's minions, or even at the beginning of the series when Yoh and Ren clashed for the first time. I don't know, it just feels like the stakes are higher when a fight is happening outside the tournament. It feels personal, like a street fight where anything can happen. The shaman rules protects the fighters, which still makes it feel like the fights taking place in the shaman tournament feel like friendly competition. You don't feel like people can die from these fights in the tournament. Hao is an exception because he is the main antagonist of the series, so seeing him kill in the shaman tournament was to emphasize how much of an evil prick Hao is. But no other fights in the tournament actually resulted in shamans dying. However, when you look just recently, all the fights outside the tournament, Ren fighting against Hao's minions when Peyote did the killing blow, Ryu in the last two episodes, Yoh Hao in this episode, and the major damage that Yoh took in this episode, you can clearly see that these fights are not just fights, they're death matches, which is what for me made the Shaman King 2001 anime exciting in the final portion of the story when Hao single-handedly cancelled the tournament. It literally became a free-for-all. If you die, you lose, and whoever gets to the Great Spirit first and combine with him, they win. It adds more excitement to the series when it's like this because you genuinely don't know what's going to happen next. If Yoh and his friends lose an official shaman fight in the tournament, they can always go back and train again and hopefully win the next fight. If they lose a fight out in the open against the X-Laws or Hao's minions or even the Gandara group, they will die. That's the difference. What do you guys think? Do you think the fights in the tournament are more exciting than the fights that are not part of the tournament? Let me know in the comments down below. Now, our main man Yoh. In my opinion, he was at his absolute best here in this episode. Everything he did just oozed class. That's the thing about him. He's not only a badass, he's a class act as well. I love how he's fighting the Golem, which has a Furyoku level of 550,000. And Yoh himself, he knows he's no match against the Golem, but he kept his composure anyway and managed to not only temporarily defeat the Golem, but also talk some sense into Redseb. I love it when Yoh is in his serious mode. It's like Luffy or Goku or even Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen. They're such easygoing characters, but that rare moment when they're in their serious mode, they go all in. They don't hang about. They're such easygoing characters, but once they're in their serious mode, they're ruthless to whoever they're fighting against. I mentioned in my previous reviews, I think it was probably the Osorizon flashback, where I mentioned that Yoh is soft inside, which he is, but now you can clearly see that there is a bit of darkness there within Yoh. Yoh, when he's in serious mode, it's like he turns into Hao. Like for instance, remember the time when he told Manta to go away after his loss against Faust? That was cold from Yoh. And throughout this episode, he was brutal against Redseb. But he had to be, because he wanted to make him understand that all your actions have a consequence, and especially if you hurt someone. I love how he even uses the fact that the Golem killed Yoh Hao. He then asks Redseb, is that now a valid reason for him to go after Redseb? Because Yoh Hao is also a close friend of Yoh. Then surely he's justified to kill Redseb and Seyram if the same logic applied. Yoh sees the cycle of revenge, and it's a never-ending cycle, which is why we saw him so pissed off in this episode. Yoh knows that once the kids kill Yoh Hao, someone else can then exact their revenge on Redseb and Seyram, such as Yoh himself. But then if Yoh ends up killing the two kids, someone else would want revenge against him because of that action. And say if Yoh actually gets killed by, let's say for example, Seyram's dad whilst he is in possession of his daughter, and then Anna and the rest of Yoh's friends would want revenge against Seyram's dad. And that's the main point. It doesn't end. It will continue to go on and on in a never-ending cycle. That's what Yoh means by you give what you get. You hurt people, people will then come back to you and hurt you. I loved Yoh in this episode. Honestly, this was one of those moments I was looking forward to the most when the news of Shaman King 2021 dropped, because he was just so cool in this. He has Hao's cool factor, but as a good guy, which is flipped on its head. And then when Hao does turn up in this episode, it doesn't feel like such a big deal because Yoh already stole the show in this episode. I feel like this incarnation of Yoh will be the fan favorite this time round over Hao, definitely. Yoh Hao ends up in hell, and in chapter 195, he actually says he wants to atone for all his crimes he has committed, which the episode missed, which is probably the only negative I will give. But other than that, this was an excellent episode. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this episode. We'll be releasing a podcast type discussion on the Osiris flashback next week, so stay tuned for that. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the Shaman Tribe.